Hello, bonjour tout le monde. Welcome. Bienvenue à la séance d'aujourd'hui. Communiquer qui vous êtes, l'entrevue et l'art de raconter. Donc, welcome to today's segment on communicating who you are, interview and storytelling, and what they do. So my name is Lynn Landry. I am an employee of the Canada School of Public Service, and I am so pleased to be here with you today. I'd like to acknowledge that since I am in Dieppe, New Brunswick, right beside Moncton, I'm on the traditional unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. I recognize that we all work in different places and you might work in a different territory. And I want to take the time to say that I'm super grateful to be present in this territory. And maybe you can think about where you are located right now. Donc, aujourd'hui, on veut vraiment que vous participiez avec nous. Utilisez la fonction question-réponse qui est disponible juste en bas de nos belles faces de toutes nous autres. Donc, just use the question and answer option right at the bottom of all our pretty faces. Put your questions in there. Un coup que les questions seront mises dans le Q&As, et ça, c'est un mélange anglais-français, vous pouvez rajouter des petits thumbs up. Encore un mélange anglais-français. I'm going to keep you on your toes today. So just press the thumbs up. It's going to vote up the question and we'll be addressing those first. Donc, aujourd'hui, on a 3 excellents panélistes. Je suis tellement chanceuse d'être ici avec Justin, Michel et Tammy. Donc, je vais leur demander de se présenter parce que c'est les meilleures personnes pour faire ça. Donc, on va commencer avec Justin. So, Justin, you can start introducing yourself.
Thanks for that. Hi, I'm Justin. I will apologize in advance. There is construction outside my building, so if you hear jackhammers or explosions, that's what that is. I'll do my best to mute. I'm Justin. I am a senior analyst at the Privy Council office, working at the Digital Communications Coordination Unit, right now working on COVID-19 communications for the Government of Canada. In terms of an introduction, maybe I'll just say this in lieu of what we're discussing here. I've been in public service for coming to 6 years now. I've worked at 2 departments in a variety of functions and roles, but I think I can count on my hands how many times, or one hand, how many times I've actually applied for a job, and in less than one hand, half a hand maybe, on how many times I've actually done an interview process. My navigation of public service in terms of my career has been fairly non-traditional, and I really am appreciative of the experience I've had, and I hope to share that part of my navigation, I guess, of my career and how I've done some sort of informal and non-traditional interviewing and storytelling through that sort of interview process. So that's what I hope to share today.
Cool. Thank you so much, Justin. As long as you don't blow up, it's okay. The noise is in the background. You had me scared for a moment when you said, if you hear things blowing up, I was like, oh no, not him, please, not him. That's going to destroy our whole segment about storytelling, actually. Ou peut-être que ça apporterait un petit peu d'énergie, mais on va le garder comme ça. On va aller maintenant à monsieur, pas monsieur, mais à Michel. Mais c'est monsieur quand même. Allez-y pour vous présenter.
Merci beaucoup, Lynn. C'est un grand plaisir pour moi d'avoir cette opportunité d'être avec tout le monde aujourd'hui. Hein. C'est un sujet très important, l'entrevue. Qui suis-je par rapport à ça? Donc, vraiment un privilège pour moi de pouvoir y participer. Et je suis le papa de 2 superbes filles, Rose et Émilie, tous les 2 encore à l'université. And I'm also the stepfather of 2 other daughters, Valérie and Laurence, who are in the workforce. I'm Algonquin and a proud member of the Kitigan-Zibi First Nations community, about 120 kilometers north of Ottawa. So currently enjoying being our traditional and ancestral lands here in Val-des-Monts by the lake, Lac Saint-Pierre. I've been in the federal public service for close to 30 years now. Ça fait longtemps, une carrière là, dans laquelle je suis tellement content, honnêtement, beaucoup de réflexion, de reconnaissance sur ce que la fonction publique fédérale a pu m'apporter en tant qu'individu, en tant que professionnel. I'm one of those individuals that, loves learning. I'm passionate about learning and teaching. I spent a long part of my career at the Canada School of Public Service, as a matter of fact, and formerly the Canadian Centre for Management Development, delving in all kinds of wonderful leadership development experiences during my stay at the Canada School of Public Service. At a very young age, actually, I dreamed about opening my own private school. So I'm a bit of a dreamer. Okay? I like to, make things happen based on what I'm thinking about. I love converting ideas into concrete realizations. I think that's what I enjoyed the most about opening my own private school. I started off as a teacher in a private school. I was teaching the sciences, basically biology, chemistry, physics, algebra and geometry, calculus, the wonderful subjects. And then I co-founded actually Macdonald-Cartier Academy, a small French immersion private school in Ottawa. And did that for a couple of years and then realized, no, you know what? I need to be doing something else. So that's when I joined the public service at the Canadian Centre for Management Development. So continuing with my passion for learning, but really getting into design and development. So, that I've taken that idea and, just being a pragmatic innovator is basically what I ended up doing. But I have to be very honest. Early in my career, I thought of leaving the public service. I figured, the hierarchy is killing me. Didn't like, the red tape that we were confronted with. And it was an elder by the name of Diane Reed. Diane Reed, that's right. Someone I just met, spent a week together in a new program that I'd designed and developed and was delivering on a First Nations community. We were working with leaders from the Huron-Wendat, and we had elders from different areas of Quebec that were joining us. And at the end of the week, I sort of suggested I was going to leave the public service, and she says, no, you can't. And she explained to me why I couldn't. So I went back home and I had a chat with our dearly departed William Commanda, who known me for a big part of my life, and I told him that I was going to quit. And he says, no, you can't. And he gave me the very same reason that Diane Reed had given me. And basically, they helped me understand that I had a knack and a capacity to mobilize people, to bring different minds together and to seek to achieve one mind among the many voices that I was mobilizing. And they said that that was required, in the federal public service. It's something that would be a good public interest mandate to turn to. And so that's what I focused an awful lot of my career upon, is working in areas that would allow me to do just that. So, those are the three things that I feel would characterize me most. I'm passionate about learning and teaching. I'm a pragmatic innovator because I love to convert ideas into concrete realizations. And I'm a mobilizer. I focus on an inclusive workplace, basically the thematic of what we're so focused on these days. It's what I'm currently doing as the Senior Executive Director for the Knowledge Service for Indigenous Inclusion. And I think I've got the best executive level job in federal public service. I want to keep that a secret. Really have the privilege and honor of working with Deputy Minister Wilson in her capacity as the champion for Indigenous federal employees. So, voila, that's who I am.
I would add, Michelle, an amazing storyteller, because you got a lot of stuff in introducing yourself. And I was like, okay, this is super interesting. So thank you so much. I've been in the public service for 20 some years. So I like to think that you and I started at 12, right? That's when they hired us to join, because we look so good still.
I'm just 47.
Thank you, Michelle. Merci beaucoup. We'll go to Tammy now, so you can introduce yourself. Not the last, but not the least, for sure.
Merci beaucoup, Lynn. Je m'appelle Tammy Cardos. Je travaille à Santé Canada. Je suis directrice des initiatives stratégiques dans la direction des services en ressources humaines. Je suis très contente d'être ici parmi vous aujourd'hui parce que le sujet de dotation, c'est quelque chose qui m'intéresse énormément. Je travaille dans la direction des ressources humaines depuis 20 ans. So I'm in the 20 plus club, I guess, too. And certainly an area that I'm very, very passionate about. I think staffing in particular, although I've managed various disciplines in HR, is something that it just is near and dear to my heart. I have worked over the years with hiring managers to try and, instill innovation in our staffing practices, experiment when we can. What if we had candidates applying in person on some of our external staffing? So showing up and getting coaching in areas where perhaps their candidacy couldn't be considered further because they were missing key experience, or having employees participate on assessment processes when their director position for their unit was being staffed, to try and say, okay, well, can we tie in direct feedback from the group that's going to be managed by the filling of this leadership position? So lots of really neat innovations along the way, and certainly very interested in the candidate perspective, because of course, as a government of Canada, we're trying to attract people to the public service. So some of the messaging that we see on posters like do not or you must in capital and bold all over our job ads, those aren't necessarily welcoming responses. So de quelle façon est-ce qu'on peut améliorer nos processus en dotation pour les candidats? C'est la raison pour laquelle je suis contente d'être ici, parce que j'aimerais entendre vos commentaires, vos questions afin de mieux comprendre la façon avec laquelle vous verrez les processus actuellement. So I'm really excited to be here, very privileged to be sitting on this panel with Justin and Michelle. Although I am a little disappointed I had to go after Michelle, because I do find he is just brilliantly articulate. So je pense que c'est un peu difficile de suivre son introduction. En tout cas, merci Lynn, et j'ai vraiment hâte de faire partie de cette discussion aujourd'hui.
Merci à toi, Tammy. Merci beaucoup. Donc, c'est noté. Michelle passe le dernier. So we're going to put Michelle at the end of every question so nobody can feel like, oh, no, there's nothing else to add. I feel your pain. I felt it a little bit too. I was like, oh, no, I shouldn't have done that. I'm kidding. All of you are wonderful. And I like how you bring a different perspective. Donc, on a vraiment une belle perspective. On a Michelle qui est comme du niveau direction, gestionnaire. Tammy qui est dans les ressources humaines, ça fait 20 ans. Donc, elle aussi a commencé à 12 ans. So all of us started at 12. And then Justin, that really went the irregular capital bold letters don't go more than 300 words and tell us how awesome you are and you meet these criteria in capital letters. We want you to work for the government of Canada, but shut up after you're done 300 words kind of thing. So it's going to be a great discussion, I think. Je pense que ça va être une extraordinaire discussion. Donc, aujourd'hui, on est toutes virtuelles. So everything's virtual. We don't have a choice. COVID decided for us. So now that we're in this new world, how do we do interviews now? Like, how are we hiring in the government of Canada? Has it changed from what we were doing before? And how do we make sure that our personality shows, depending on what's the tool that we're using? Donc, comment on fait maintenant qu'on est dans un environnement virtuel? Comment le gouvernement du Canada a décidé d'embaucher les employés? Puis comment on fait pour shiner, comme on dirait, dans tout ça? Si c'est correct, je vais commencer avec Tammy, peut-être, parce qu'elle a tout du côté du ressources humaines. Puis après ça, si Michelle et Justin, you have anything to add, you're more than welcome to do after that. So Tammy, please. Putting you before Michelle, that's what you asked me. I'm doing it.
Merci beaucoup, Lynn. Et donc, c'est vraiment clair, nos processus actuellement sont vraiment différents qu'avant la pandémie. Il faut participer au processus d'une façon virtuelle. Au passé, ce n'était pas toujours le cas. I will say, I do sit in Winnipeg, Manitoba, so anytime, any job interview I've participated in, I have actually been over the phone in many occasions over the past few years. So having the video piece for a regional employee has actually been a bit of an added bonus, but I can appreciate it's still a bit of a transition for those who have had the more formal in boardroom kind of interviews, to have to do it over MS Teams. In some cases, of course, to have bandwidth issues because you've got perhaps competing lines on. I've got 2 children homeschooling right now, and there's times where that impacts our networks, which adds to the nervousness. Of course, you don't want your computer to be crashing in the middle of an interview. It's certainly, the virtual interviews versus the in-person, that connection that you can sometimes make with the body language, making eye contact. When you're a part of a discussion and there's 3 or 4 people on the Zoom or the MS Teams, you're certainly not making eye contact with individuals. Not that that should be necessarily something that is measured against us, but it's still, there's a certain comfort levels on a lot of times. I had actually read an article talking about the fact that as part of a good tip for interview prep was to hold a warm cup, because when you shake the hands of the interview panel, that warmth comes across, and there's a certain subliminal message that goes along with that. Well, ce n'est pas une option actuellement, en considérant le fait qu'on doit avoir notre entretien par video. The other piece that I think many of you may be seeing is this move to, and I know we use this at Service Canada, is the vidcruiter type of scenarios or the pre-recorded videos. Those have both pros and cons to them. Certainly the idea of sitting here and videoing my responses to questions leaves a little bit of a, I guess, that lack of engagement opportunity. So if I'm videoing, recording my answers, I don't get that engagement. I can't add to things on the fly. It's very, very bizarre, I would say, of an experience. En même temps, ce type de processus nous donne un peu plus de flexibilité. Par exemple, si j'ai manque la connexion avec mon ordinateur pendant la journée à cause du fait que les enfants sont dans la maison, peut-être je peux sauvegarder mon entretien pendant la soirée. So certainly having that flexibility to say, okay, well, you know what, I'm really busy at work or with kids and homeschooling and balancing all these things, but Saturday morning I've got an hour and I'm going to do my video recording there. So certainly there's some advantages to these video recording options, as much as there are certainly not the traditional method, but I would say that that's definitely one that we're seeing a lot more utilization of, especially in our external, although we are doing them in internal processes too. So c'est tout pour moi.
C'est vrai qu'on est vraiment... Moi aussi, je suis dans les régions, puis on utilisait un peu des vidéoconférences avant, but now there's no other choice. We can't see each other. And I was thinking, like, I'd have to sit on my hand and make them warm or something to get the cup of coffee thing if there's nothing around. But anyway. Michel, avais-tu quelque chose à ajouter?
Oui, toujours quelque chose à ajouter, Lynn. Mais j'aime ce que tu as mis à partager. Je crois qu'on est dans une situation où on peut ajouter de nouvelles choses, faire les choses autrement, innover un petit peu avec les approches qu'on va utiliser. Donc, moi, je regarde toujours ça comme une belle zone grise dans laquelle on peut commencer à faire autre chose. Comme Tammy a dit, dans le passé, on faisait des entrevues là, qui étaient un petit peu mixtes. Hein. On avait des gens qui étaient en face-to-face situation, on avait d'autres qui étaient en ligne, et ça faisait partie de la game. Donc, dans ce contexte-là, je ne vois pas beaucoup de différence en ce qui me concerne quand je suis un membre de jury. So, as a board member, I don't think it changes what I'm seeking and looking for. I agree, the handshake isn't there, okay? But that's not the heart of it all, right? If I don't know if the guide to preparing for interviews deck that I shared was sent to everyone, but if anyone's taken an opportunity to read through that, they'll see what I'm seeking as a board member. I'd like to see someone who's taking ownership of the interview, who's demonstrating their enthusiasm, their positive outlook. Those things don't change, whether it's done virtually or whether it's done face-to-face. I want to see someone who's able to manage the interview, the time management aspect, setting the tempo, the pace of the interview. All that belongs to the interviewee, really. And that's what I'm seeking to observe, is how is the interviewee conducting themselves, going through the interview process and relating to me and others as board members. I think that's very important as well. I'm always looking for structure in an interview and how someone manages their interview. And so, I'm always looking at, answers that will, introduce the answer, share different ideas that are going to be, elaborated upon as part of the answer, and then conclude and let me know that we're moving on to the next question and answer. So those type of things don't change for me. They still remain the same. I guess there are advantages and disadvantages, as Tammy has shared. So I think I'll stop at that and give a little bit of space to Justin as well, because I can see him shaking and he's getting anxious to jump in here. So over to you, Justin. I'm giving you the talking stick.
I will virtually catch the talking stick there. I noticed someone's mentioned stars, so that was a great point. I don't know that I have much to add on how much the virtual environment has changed the formal process. I don't know that it really significantly has shifted much. I think the process in many formal settings are largely the same. It's still, the standardized questions, the response and the fulsomeness of that response is what really, merits your candidacy. But like what I do notice, and maybe also in the space of the non-formal interview, the networking opportunity, the coffee chat, or the virtual coffee chat, the informational interview, that's really different because we're fundamentally, I think, hardwired to have an appreciation for face-to-face contact. And Tammy mentioned like the eye contact, like, yeah, you won't get docked a point for it, but it's definitely a way to convey, active listening, or build establish some sense of rapport. In the virtual, now time, I think it requires a lot more, mindfulness. So you need to be a lot more deliberate when you are reaching out. And perhaps I should have shared this in my intro, but when I came to public service as a casual, what I ended up doing was sending a wide shot of emails, never asking for a job, but really asking for coffees. I sent 350 plus emails in a span of 6 or 7 months, and I wouldn't recommend anyone do that. That's just what I happened to do. But what really was successful for me was, doing my research beforehand about the person, finding where they are online, what their profiles, wherever they might be, what that tells me about them, and then pivoting to an email ask or a LinkedIn message. I noticed this about you. I find that very interesting. I might have a pitch. That's going to be a little bit more deliberate, and you have to be a lot more, I think, in this environment, a lot more mindful of people's times. Now we're kind of hardwired or connected to our desks almost. There is no outside of work, you know what I mean? So I think being mindful of when you are reaching out to people for those informational interviews is just as important.
That's a great point, Justin. I feel like from what you and Michelle and even Tammy has said, I'm on an interview right now. So I hope I'm looking good que je fais une bonne job. Mais c'est vrai, à toutes les fois qu'on se présente, it's a chance to network and build connections. And maybe if you tell them about what you're wanting to do when you grow up, I'll never growing up, by the way. And if I grow up, I want to be unicorn princess. So I don't think that's in the government of Canada yet, but on va voir là, si ça s'en vient. Mais je pense que c'est vrai, comme faites des connexions. Which brings me to my next point, because for this, I had to think about what I wanted to wear. Do we have to think about what we want to wear now when we're either doing an informal or formal interview? Does it really matter? So you don't know, but right now I have my hot pink slippers. They're not hot pink. I'm totally kidding, but I have slippers. So Justin, do you want to tell us a little bit about that? Do you pay attention to what you wear or how cool your hair is being?
Yeah, I mean, does what I wear matter? I mean, to a degree. I mean, I think in the before days, my answer to this question would have been like clear cut, kind of teetering on cliche, you know, try to go formal, dress to impress, dress for the job you want, not the job you have. Today, I think in this digital virtual environment, it's changed a little bit. I think really what's most important is to be mindful of the context and what you really want to convey. So again, if you want to go for an informational interview, like that was, you know, set up by you or through a colleague with the intent of being casual, you know, maybe go casual, maybe not like sleeveless tank top casual. But t-shirt, no, that's not at you. Like I'm talking like, you know, muscle tee casual.
I know.
And you know, a t-shirt and sweatpants should be just fine. And if you're doing any virtual meeting that reveals anything below the waist, or whatever you're doing, just stop. And you know, if for a formal process, you know, when you're competing in a candidate pool or process, you might want to consider going business casual. You may even want to go business formal. I had a colleague of mine who was doing the interview process, like the formal process, and she mentioned, as she's an evaluator, and she was saying, like, you know, several of the candidates who stood out were some folks that went business formal. Again, it is not being graded against you, but it is an opportunity to stand out against your competition, for lack of a better word. Now, with that said, I think what you also need to be mindful of is your background. I think that's another part of you know, how you appear online. You know, a presentable, clean, organized space is probably something that'll serve an indicator for how you might work. Again, for largely in an informal, informational interview setting. Like, again, it won't be, I don't think it will be ever used against you in any formal process, but it could be an indication of how organized and presentable you might be. And I recognize that that can also be challenging for whatever reason. You know, well lit, it could be you've got kids running around, pets, or you just have no choice but to be in some sort of clutter. That's okay. In that case, I definitely recommend folks use a background blur or a virtual background, which I say all to say, like, end of the day, visual field on your front camera is a lot of real estate that can serve as an opportunity to convey something about you. So where you can, would definitely encourage to take advantage of that. And I say this while wearing a Toronto Raptors shirt, but I'm trying to keep it casual. So I'll end it with that.
I'm in my laundry room with my own homemade sign behind me, and I have no sleeve, so I felt really attacked. I didn't feel attacked at all, Justin, not at all. But seriously, somebody wrote in the comments, dress to be presentable. That's like the new dress code, and I loved your shirt, by the way, so we're all good. So, Michel, Tammy, quelque chose que vous voulez ajouter à propos de comment on se présente? Est-ce qu'il faut qu'on s'habille? Moi, je dirais, mettez pas votre pyjama de licorne, là, mais à part de ça. Ça va? Super. Merci. Donc, je vais retourner à Michel, puis je vais te laisser parler en premier parce que j'ai le droit de faire ça. Oh, t'es sur mute, Michel, t'es en sourdine.
Ah. Oui, excuse-moi, je disais peut-être que ta amie avait quelque chose à dire. J'aurais voulu ajouter une affaire, Lynn.
Oui.
J'aime beaucoup ce que Justin a partagé. Il utilise deux mots que j'utilise dans tous mes rôles de mentor. Le mot mindful, mindfulness, le mot deliberate. Two key words in everything that we do. In terms of anything else that we do, whatever you do, don't wear to distract. Don't become a distraction. You know, it's part of how you manage your interview and own the interview. If you're always doing this stuff and so on and so forth, as you're answering your questions and you're talking with your hands, huge distraction, and it'll take away from your message. It'll take away from what you're trying to achieve in terms of engagement with the board members. So it's the same thing with, you know, what we wear. I think, you know, just ensure that you're not being a distraction and that you're having every board member focused on your message and what you're trying to convey about you.
C'est un super bon point, Michel. Puis moi, je parle avec mes mains. Ça fait, again, I don't feel like you're hitting on me, but that's okay because this is an informal interview. So I'm okay. And we won't even call it an interview. But I will ask you to start, Michelle, if you don't mind. I'd like to hear, and I love how you brought back Justin's 2 words, mindfulness and deliberate. I wrote them down too. I was like, oh, that's so smart. And I was writing stuff down. And it's true. Like, we need to be mindful of every moment almost when we're on camera. So how do we make a good first impression? And you talked a little bit about what you were looking for during the interview, and how it hasn't really changed for you, but what makes a good first impression for you when somebody's interviewing for a role?
Yeah, as I mentioned, I see the interview as having 3 distinct parts: the introduction, the body, and the conclusion. And, the making first impressions piece comes into the introduction. It's an opportunity for you to take ownership of that interview. If you know somebody who's on the board, don't hesitate to mention, how are you? How's the family? It's been a while since we've last seen each other. Be comfortable. I always say, make sure that you're grounded before you get into the interview process. We all go about grounding ourselves in different ways, but it's about becoming mindful, as Justin has said, be mindful that, you need to own this. It's about you, and you want to take ownership of it as soon as you possibly can. You also need to be paying attention. Justin mentioned that as well, be listening. So at a certain point in time, I'm sure Tammy will say that, she'll take the time to explain, here's how the interview is going to unfold, and so on and so forth. If you've had the opportunity to sit with the questions ahead of the interview and prepare your answers, it's a good opportunity for you to just reach out to the board members and ask if they're comfortable with changing the order in which you're going to be answering the question. It's another way of demonstrating you're taking ownership of this. You have a story to tell. You'd like to begin with this question and build upon that as you go from one question to the other, and manage your own time. Don't let them decide, okay, well, we're going to ask the question, you answer. Second question, you answer. Just go about it by managing it yourself if you have that opportunity. Some board members will say, no, we're going to go in a specific order, and that's all you need to do. And you say, okay, no problems. I'm comfortable with that as well. Again, it's all about demonstrating that confidence and beginning from the get-go. You have to be clear around what you're going to be communicating. I think that's very important. I also think that preparing your 3-minute pitch is a very important part of the interview process, because inevitably there'll likely be a icebreaker question that'll be thrown at you to get the ball rolling. And so you need to decide, how do I want to tackle that icebreaker question? Whatever the question is, here's what I'd like to share. And again, it has to be something that will help them understand why they need to be thinking about you for this job more than anyone else. You see, so when I introduced myself, I made a pitch about 3 things in relationship to who I am. And I think you probably remember the first one, right, Lynn?
Of course, I remember the first one. It had to do with learning.
Exactly. I'm really passionate about learning and teaching. See, you remembered. I want to make sure that you remember something about me as part of the interview. What are those key things that I want you to remember, right? So that's going to come back throughout the whole interview process. So that first impression is about what little nugget do I want to just drop right now, and I'm going to build upon that throughout the whole interview and conclude with it as well. There's so much more, of course, but
those are great advice that you're giving to us, Michelle. Thank you so much. I'm sure that Justin, before drinking 350 coffees, had prepared his 3-minute pitch as well. Like, I'm sure he had worked on his research and figured out, okay, this is what they need. This is how I can meet that. And here, let me tell you about how amazing I am. right? So awesome. We're going to go to Tammy for one last question, and then we're going to go to the questions from our participants. Donc, il y a beaucoup de questions qui sont dans la partie questions et réponses. Donc, continuez de les mettre, continuez de voter avec le petit thumbs up. Le petit pouce levé, qu'on va dire. Donc, puis après ça, on va aller après cette dernière question-là que je vais poser à Tammy, en fait. So we're talking about storytelling today. How do we employ storytelling techniques to tell our own stories in an interview? Have you seen it or any recommendations for us?
Yes, c'est une bonne question, c'est ça. À mon avis, on peut engager tous les membres de la comité de sélection en partageant une histoire intéressante. So certainly storytelling can be a very, very good technique during an interview. Typically, you're going to see one of two types of questions, right? You may get the name a time when, which you can certainly tell your story, and being thoughtful in how you tell that story is obviously very important. You know, this imagining, even though I know, as Michelle said, sometimes you know the board members, sometimes you don't. But imagine you know the board members and you say, well, you know, they know this story, so I don't really have to give that much detail. Non, c'est vraiment important de partager tous les détails à propos de l'exemple d'une façon positive, you know, engaging. So you still want to tell the story as if they don't know you, they don't know the story. So you're going to share pertinent details, but you want to make the story rich that you're sharing, right? That's why when you're preparing for the interview, you're going to be thinking about past examples where you're really proud of something that you did, where you had a really great experience, and there is an exciting story to share there. The other type of question that you sometimes get is a situational question. So imagine that you're now stepping into the role of a manager, and you've got, you know, a labor relations issue to deal with, and you've got all these things. How are you going to deal with that situation? In those scenarios, of course, you're telling a fictitious story, and similarly, you want that story to be engaging, and you want it to really demonstrate how you would handle that, and being your authentic self in that is definitely key. The other way that I've responded to those types of situations, which I found to be a really positive technique, is to say, here's what I would do. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to tell you what I have done. So, j'ai déjà j'ai déjà fait face à ce type de situation. Et en effet, je faisais les étapes qui suivent. So certainly pulling that in. So what I would do is great, but what I have done really and doing it in a storytelling fashion can be really engaging. One of the actually more recent interviews that I participated in as a participant, so I was applying for a process, and I knew the interview was a good sign that the interview was going well, because again, I received a situational question and I flipped it into, you know, I have lived that, I have experienced that, here's how I handled it, here's how I built rapport with my team, here's how, you know, I was able to overcome the obstacles by effective listening, and you know, kind of went on. And I could see the board members were, even though they were over video, were really engaged, and all of a sudden they had some follow-up questions because they were interested in the story I was telling. And so I think trying to shape it in that way is really, it's exciting for us because we all like telling stories when we spend time with our friends, which hopefully we can do again one day soon. On aime beaucoup l'opportunité de partager les histoires avec nos amis. Donc, on peut penser à propos l'entrevue de la même façon d'un certain sens. Prendre le temps nécessaire de préparer une histoire intéressante. When I was doing my FSWEP interview, actually many years ago, I remember how excited that the board members were when I was telling them stories of my customs experience. So, well, I was at the border and I met this, you know, interesting scenario, and they stopped writing because they were just enraptured by the stories that I was sharing about, you know, finding cocaine in someone's backpack and all these things. So, you know, quand vous avez une histoire intéressante, il faut que vous la partagiez. C'est vraiment important.
Such great tips. Thank you so much for sharing, Tammy. And we'll need to talk more about that cocaine story offline. I'm joking. It's all good. I'm going to bring in, if you don't mind, for Michelle and Justin, based on what Tammy has said, which is all great information, what if you don't have experience about the position? And that's our first question, actually, that got upvoted as much. So I don't have any experience. How can I tell a story that shows that I'm able to learn to handle the duties? Do I focus on my skills or about my personality and values? And the Lynn in me was like, or do I focus about how amazing Lynn is? But that's not what it says in the question. It really says, like, what do I focus on? Do I bring in my skills, my personality, my values? How can I show people or tell them in a story that I can handle the duties? Donc, comment on raconte aux personnes que je peux faire le travail même si j'ai pas l'expérience qu'ils ont demandé? Michel?
Bonne question, Lynn. Ça m'étonnerait que tu sois à l'entrevue si tu n'avais pas l'expérience pour te rendre là, mais il se peut, en étant étudiant qui essaie de se trouver un nouvel emploi, quelqu'un qui vient d'entrer dans la fonction publique à sa première job et puis là veut continuer à progresser. I think it's important to think about the following. When I'm looking to hire someone, I focus an awful lot on trying to understand the character of the person, because I realize that knowledge is easily achievable. It's something that you can gain, weekends, weeknights, some weekdays, if it becomes part of the learning plan where you're just going to be, getting yourself up to speed on the knowledge factors that you might be missing. But if someone doesn't have quite the characteristics that you're seeking to have in the workplace, someone who's demonstrating that they're a team player, that they hold themselves accountable for the typical indicators that you're seeking to bring into your team. That's what I'm looking for. And I think everyone has compelling stories of their past that they can share to demonstrate those values that they bring into the organization, the values that are most meaningful to them. You can turn to speaking around the values that drive you. You can do a number of things to build that compelling story about yourself that would make it a desirable protege for the organization. So there are different ways of going about it. There's no doubt about that. I mentioned that your self-confidence is key to a successful interview. So what are you going to be standing upon to demonstrate that self-confidence? You have something, you've made it to that interview. That's what you need to speak to. You need to be authentic. Don't try to be something that you're not. Just be authentic. Your value proposition is what you're trying to help them understand about you. And then they'll have to make a decision as to whether or not, yes, this is the right fit for my organization right now. If not right now, maybe later. I've gotten to know Lynn, and I'm going to have that in my back pocket for future opportunities. And this is what Justin was talking about. Every opportunity to talk about who you are is potentially an interview opportunity, whether you realize it or not. Those communications and being mindful about how you communicate who you are is extremely important. So I would probably begin with that and invite my colleague Justin.
I'm super excited that I'm in your back pocket, Michelle. That's what I want to start with, parce que I think that's a good place to be, hanging around. But I agree with you. What you see Lynn right now is what you'll see Lynn every day in the office. So, and I'm not everybody's cup of tea, and that's okay. Maybe I don't fit right now. Maybe I'll fit later. And maybe you're not my cup of tea either. No, I'm joking. Lots of people are my cup of tea, so we're good. I'm a big lover.
Thing. You're absolutely right.
Mais c'est vrai. Peut-être que c'est pas le bon fit pour toi non plus. So that's something to think about, definitely. Merci beaucoup. Est-ce que quelqu'un voulait ajouter quelque chose à ce propos-là, quand on n'est peut-être pas l'expérience?
Perhaps I can just add one comment.
Je pense à d'autres choses parce que...
Est-ce que tu peux m'entendre? Okay, parfait. The only thing I would maybe add to that is, I'm doing a lot of reading on positive psychology, and I think that there's something also in that to, bringing forward your, again, even if you're lacking the particular experience for that job, bringing forward this notion of, I'm really happy to be here, right? I'm really excited about this opportunity. I don't have the experience yet, and it's okay to be honest and to put it out there. I mean, you don't need to fabricate what's not there, right? So definitely sharing to say, I'm nervous, first of all. Je suis nerveuse actuellement. Il faut que vous sachiez que je sois nerveuse aujourd'hui et peut-être je manque l'expérience nécessaire, mais en même temps, j'ai beaucoup d'enthousiasme en ce qui concerne ce poste. J'ai beaucoup d'initiative parce que au passé, j'ai déjà fait quelque chose. So you can still speak to your attributes in a positive way. And I think, showing throughout the interview, even, at the onset, we talked about the introduction, but even at the end, which I'm digressing a little bit, expressing gratitude. The individuals that you're meeting with have taken time away from their long list of things that they have to manage. They've taken the time to get to know you. They've taken the time to gather information about your candidacy. So thanking them for that, that time, and also showing that you're wanting to use that time in an effective way, and share again your interest, your passion to be a public servant or to take on this new role. And as Michelle talked about, learning, and I'm a continuous learner, like all these things are really important things. And it's not really, we do try and focus, I will say in a positive way, we are trying to focus on competencies versus experience in many cases. So it's the skill set you bring versus the experience in cases, I think, more and more often. And je suis très contente de voir ce changement, parce que c'est les compétences qui sont le plus important à mon avis.
Je suis d'accord, Tammy, puis j'ai vu une différence moi aussi. Moins sur l'expérience et les connaissances et plus sur les compétences, les habiletés, les skills. When I started in the government of Canada, my first work term, I was so young, it wasn't that long ago, but anyway, they asked, I was part of a work term co-op placement, and they asked, why did you pick Lynn over the 5 other candidates? And they said, she was the most enthusiastic. So I'm not like new at being enthusiastic, but that's what differentiated me from the other people, right? And sometimes that's just it. So Justin, please.
Those are great answers. And that was a great answer too. And so maybe I just want to pick up 2 things, because I'm trying to make sure I understood the question correctly. It was, if you don't have an experience, what should you convey? A little bit more context might be helpful, but what I'm trying to get at is like, if you're in an interview process, you've actually already, I'm pretty sure, fairly deemed to have the experience. You've already applied through the screening process and deemed to have that experience. So maybe I'd reimagine the premise of the question, because it's not just the actual work experience. It's any other experience that you might be able to leverage, where it was a school project, volunteer work. That's all relevant, I think, and important to draw from and draw on, particularly when it's the interview question. Because again, most in an interview stage, a lot of evaluators don't necessarily see your CV. So you're welcome to use that. The other thing that I want to touch on, and Tammy spoke to this, is acknowledgement of your, I don't want to say lack of experience, but you might want to acknowledge authentically, like you might not have as much experience as you would like to, but an expression on, willing to, learn and develop. Here's how you thought about it. Here's how you leverage that thinking that's involved in that experience. And ultimately, you're conveying, I guess, 2 things. One, that you can be honest about what experiences you have. And 2, demonstrate a willingness of a growth mindset. And you compare that to someone that comes off as, more than confident, a little bit cocky. The competency you're probably looking for is a growth mindset, not the person who says, I've had it all figured out, this is like easy peasy for me. Like, you probably actually at that stage in the interview, you're testing for the competency, the willingness of that character to demonstrate the competencies and character traits you're looking for in a human that you want to work for you or work with you.
You're so smart, Justin. I have the best, smartest people on this panel today. I'm like, Yes, be yourself and be human. Like it's always good. And then mindful and deliberate and show self-confidence. And I have it all written down. I'm going to be awesomely smart even more after that.
I just realized the answer that I gave was far shorter in your background.
Exactly. Be you. Believe in yourself. It's my reminder every day. I worked a lot on the last year for that. So I'm going to go to, there's a few, they're all equal. So it's really hard for me to figure out where I'm going to go. But I think I'm going to go to, we used to have, and sometimes maybe we still do, very structured, formal interviewing. They ask you a question and you know what they're looking for. Sometimes they give it ahead of time. Teamwork. Can you tell us of a situation where? And then you're like, okay, I need to make sure I do my star and I talk in the I. And yes, I need to talk about the team because the team's important. Puis là, faudrait que je m'assure que j'ai tout les bons points pour qu'ils me choisissent. Puis, like, some people actually made a job, I think, at one point of knowing how to answer those questions to come up on top. Because I did interviews, and all of a sudden I'm like, she's looking at my sheet. She knows exactly everything we're looking for, right? Back in the day. So, and then sometimes it's hard to be authentic and natural and have an answer that's talking about storytelling. And so, do you have any tips about that? And maybe also about the I aspect of the interview. Like, how do I make it about me, but don't like diss my team? L'équipe, c'est important, mais l'interview, c'est pour parler de moi, puis c'est moi que je veux qu'ils embauchent. Donc, est-ce qu'il y a quelqu'un qui aimerait commencer? Tammy, veux-tu commencer avant Michel?
Oui, s'il te plaît. You know what? I think that the piece about the I and the we is absolutely an excellent point. First of all, when we do training with employees on how to prepare for a process, that's a key piece to indicate, right? You need to explain your role versus the group of the collective. Now, honnêtement, je trouve cette habitude pas mal difficile parce que la plupart du temps, quand je parle de mes réussites, j'aimerais parler de l'équipe que j'ai gérée pendant cette époque. So I find that it is hard because I'm a credit giver, right? I want to give credit to my team. So in the interview, I really do have to, and a technique that I've kind of thought through for my own candidacy is to say, okay, why not just say it right in the interview to say, you know what? I'm normally a very humble person. For today, I'm going to step outside of my comfort zone and I'm going to speak in the I. But I need you to know that if it's, let's say it's a leadership role, which I think every box on every org chart in every organization is a leadership role, in my opinion. So even though I like to lead, I like to engage, I work with others, I am going to speak in the I today for the purposes of this interview so that it's clear to you what role I played. But I think that could help set the framework and even give yourself a bit of a structure to help feel a bit more comfort speaking in the I. L'autre chose que je fais souvent avant une entrevue, c'est le fait que je lis les courriels positifs just avant une entrevue. So I read emails from colleagues to help put me again in a positive mindset, compliments and thoughtful reflections. And again, it just kind of helps put yourself in that right mindset. Like Lynn said, you're scrambling to try and I better make sure I say this. I better make sure I say this. The calmer you are, the more positive your mindset is, you know, the better equipped you'll be to tell that story. And one last piece, I loved this. I saw a TED Talks once that talked about, you know, the positive side of stress. And so I've used this technique again myself, even in presentations and interviews, is that when the heart rate's up, so you're about to enter into an interview and your heart's racing, try and think of that not so much as, oh my goodness, I'm nervous, because nervous has a negative connotation to it. Je pense pendant une telle situation, merci à mon cœur, parce que grâce à mon cœur, j'ai l'énergie nécessaire de me présenter pendant cette entrevue. So thank you, my heart. Thank you for pumping all this oxygen into my body because now you've energized me and you're getting me ready. So instead of thinking about it as jeepers, I am nervous, it's thank you, I am energized. And some of these little mindset shifts can really just help us ensure we're telling those stories in a more, you know, confident way and not so concerned with, you know, missing words on the STAR method that we've spelled out before the interview and these sorts of things. So, merci.
Ah, merci, Tammy. Je veux dire aux gens que le guide que Michel a mentionné un peu plus tôt est disponible sur la page de GCpedia. So the guide that Michel mentioned is on the GCpedia page for Finn. Puis, je commence toujours mes entrevues. Oh, the Finn wiki page. Oh my gosh, sorry. I'm such a great host. I gave you the wrong place. Well, anyway, that's okay. It's part of my great interview this afternoon. But that's okay. I'm in Michelle's back pocket, so I'm good to go. Donc, vraiment, c'est sur la page wiki si vous voulez le regarder. Et puis, Michel, je vais te céder la parole. Je commence toujours mes entrevues, moi, en disant, je suis un peu stressée, ça fait longtemps que je n'ai pas eu d'entrevue. Puis là, les gens font, ah oui, ça va bien aller. And then I set up the stage. I'm already stressed, so they all know about it. Vas-y, Michel.
Ouais, c'est une très bonne question, Lynn, que tu as mis sur la table. I'll come back to the key words that have been shared. Being mindful, being deliberate. I joined the Federal Public Service as a management trainee, and that program was meant to accelerate you to the management ranks. So it was an accelerated management development program. And they were very deliberate about helping understand the importance of networking. We were networking like crazy. We were networking animals. My network was huge. I could call upon just about anybody for just about anything to support what I was doing and so on and so forth. So there's a management training program network itself. And then there were so many other networks that we were introduced to as part of our programming. The other thing that they were very deliberate and mindful about was your performance agreement. You need to understand what it is that you bring to the organization. Those objectives are important. They're going to help you, continue to gain experience. You want breadth and scope of experience. Make sure that every year that's happening for you. You want to grow from year to year. If you want to become a manager, if you want to become an executive, be deliberate about ensuring that your performance agreement helps you do that. Your learning plan is extremely important. Make sure you continue to develop and grow, those competencies that you might, find, need a little bit more attention and so on and so forth. But also very important was journaling. And I think journaling is where it all begins. If you're journaling what's happening, lessons learned, how you responded to things and so on and so forth, you're actually preparing yourself to take care of any question that's thrown at you during interviews. Because I really think that, preparing for interviews is a very onerous process. Eventually, and this is what explained to me, yes, Michelle, initially you're going to go through and you're probably going to get job offers and you won't even go through interviews and so on and so forth. And that's what happened to me until I became an EC7. I was never interviewed. I was just offered jobs through the network, right? But then came the executive levels. And for those executive levels, you have to prepare. Those interviews, they're not, first of all, the jobs aren't going to be given to you in a silver platter, and you really need to prepare. So, they were very deliberate at helping me understand every competency, every leadership competency, you need to have your examples. Those examples belong to you. It's you, the I, right? You're going to talk about how you went about doing something, as Tammy, mentions, and so on and so forth. So the I is inherent in the interview process. You need to be able to demonstrate how you've gone about doing things, why you did it the way you did it. They're going to seek to see that you're reflecting certain values that they want to see in the workplace, that you're, conducting yourself in a certain way, and so on and so forth. So I have examples for every leadership competency that you can think of that might be thrown at me in an interview. I need to have those examples are all established, all pre-established. I can run them off like this. And that takes time, and it takes, an awful lot of effort to develop them, especially when you want to do it in a structured way and in a strategic way. You don't have a choice but to pay attention to that. So that's what I'd like to share around that one. The I is important, but an interview needs to be authentic. So it has to be about you and what you've done.
It's about your story. Tell
Yeah,
your
it's your
story. Justin, I really want to go to you, but I think they're cutting me off because I can't believe the hour has gone by. We have so many questions left. I want a part 2 of this. Like, I want to keep listening to Michelle and Tammy and Justin and speak and people listening to me. No, I'm kidding about the last part. But seriously, it's 3:30 my time, so 2:30. I want to thank you, each one of you, for being here today with me, the panelists. I want to thank every participant. Donc, merci à tous les participants qui étaient à nous. Merci à nos fabuleux panélistes. Peut-être que ça va prendre une partie 2 parce qu'il restait plein de questions. There's another event next Tuesday. It's not me, but I hear it's a great facilitator and it's always great people. I am no longer youth. Well, I like to think I am, but I'm not. But I learned a lot on every session of the Federal Youth Network. So, merci beaucoup d'avoir été là. Merci beaucoup à nos panélistes. Merci beaucoup pour vos questions. La prochaine séance, ça va être communiquer qui vous êtes, la communication au travail virtuel. So, communicating who you are, workplace communication in a virtual world, which we live in every single second since COVID. Thank you, guys.
Merci
Have a
tout le monde.
lovely day. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup.
Take care. Bye-bye. Annie,
Bye.
Justin.
Merci beaucoup.